Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm Multimeteor. This is Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014, otherwise known as Magic 2014, and this time around we're taking a look at Deadwalkers. Yeah, everything has to have zombies in them, so why should Magic 2014 be any different? First of all, let me just show you what's in the deck. Gravecrawler. There's several reasons for that. It's at first I didn't like it too much until I actually started getting into started unlocking the cards and started seeing the synergies. It is of course a 2/1 one drop, which is pretty nice. The fact that it can't block didn't really help the deck out in the beginning because you see a lot of aggressive decks on the other side. Once you have all of them unlocked, and once you start, playing this card together with some of the synergistic effects that this deck can have, then everything starts, working up or coming up Millhouse, so to speak. Um, Diagraph Ghoul is a very decent card because it's a 2/2 for 1. It doesn't really do a lot for you the first turn it comes into play, but after that it's great. So that's on the aggressive side, and that is like you get a lot of value for just 1 mana, and that's a good way to start off. I'm running a reanimate. I saw other people's deck tech of grave crawlers or deadwalkers, sorry. And the problem is that their argument against reanimate kind of uh, it kind of didn't take into account that reanimate has a lot of flexibility to it. For sure, there are many ways of getting your creatures back from your graveyard and into play, but reanimate is not only about your creatures, it's about, for example, it's difficult to get your Grave Titan back once it's been sapped or killed in some kind of way. It is also a very nice card of stealing your opponent's cards. So, yeah, great card for that. Butcher Ghoul is not the best in the world. It's a 1/1 for 2 with Undying. So it is, while it's a really lousy 1/1, it's a slightly better 2/2 for 2. So what you get is just value. And since you have a lot of cross pumping spells, you want all the halfway decent up to really great zombies in the deck working for you. Doomblade is it's not that good. I'm debating whether I should take out one more. It obviously is great against any deck that's not running black, but we have at least 2 decks running black. I think that's about it so far. Let me just no, we have 3 decks running black. I would say Massive Demir and obviously the Mirror Match is going to be the most significant conditions where Doomblade is just going to be an almost dead card or a dead card in your hand. So yeah, that's is not really the best. And in all other matchups, it's just going to be great, but we already know that. No need to talk too much about it. We have Sign in Blood, which is a great way of getting your way through or making your way through your deck. Really good card. It's also, if your opponent has some kind of a stall wall set up and is down to 2 life, well, just Sign in Blood him and he will be very unhappy to gain those cards. Lord of the Undead is the worst of the cross buffers and one of the best of the cross buffers. The first ability is great, but against the mirror, it also buffs the other side, so that's not so good. But it's a typical cross buffing lord, so to speak, in the sense that it gives all other of its creature types +1/+1, and and then its second and it's a 2/2. Yeah, so that's kind of like what's it called? Lord of the Elves. I forget what it's called. That elf spell. That's also a 2/2 +1/+1 to all other elves, and Goblin King. I think it's called the all the old kinds of like cross buffing lords, but its second ability is just too amazing. your ability to be able to, or your ability to return the zombie cards from your graveyard to your hand by just use like every turn if you want to, makes it so that this guy is going to be the answer to a lot of problems, or the solution to a lot of problems that you might have during well, not early but mid game at least. Giralf's Messenger is one of the best cards in the deck, and it was like I think it was not the single-handedly the reason that the zombie deck was so prominent in standard a while ago. Probably still is, kind of. Maybe not so much as it used to be. Um, no, probably still not. But it was definitely Giraffe Messenger who made such a huge difference. Also, a lot of other cards like Giraffe's Messenger and so on. But it's just a good card. It's a 3/2. It enters the battlefield tapped for sure, but it's a 3/2 with Undying for 3, and it forces your opponent to lose life twice usually, unless they can exile it or tie it down somehow. Death Baron is a really good lord because it only buffs your creatures, skeleton creatures, and other zombie creatures you control, and gives them death touch on top of it, on top of it all. So that makes even your smaller zombie creatures into huge threats for your opponent. Quite good in my opinion. Then we have a couple of flashback marauders. They at first I didn't really see the point to it. Thought it was a little tedious to cast a spell and remove that creature just in order to force your opponent to sacrifice a creature. And oftentimes your opponent had like tokens or something that he could easily just sacrifice. But when you have a grave crawler, and here's the second thing about Gravecrawlers that I didn't mention. You may cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. So if you sack a Gravecrawler, and you have 3 of them, so there's a fair chance that you'll be able to pull off this combo. You just you sack the Gravecrawler and you recast it if you have enough mana, and your opponent is stuck or is forced to sacrifice a creature, whereas you still have 2 creatures, so that's pretty decent. Another way you can use it is to use it with undying creatures, and give yourself a larger creature, and for example, re-trigger Giralf's Messengers. Second, sorry. What am I talking about? You can re-trigger that second ability here, or for example, you swing in with the Butcher Ghoul. Your opponent doesn't want to trade because it's a little bit buffed, and he doesn't want to lose his creature, but you want to be able to ward him off if he swings in. So you just sack it to a flashback marauder. He's forced to sacrifice a creature, and he's left in a position where you have an untapped undying creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. Plus you have the flashback marauder, so it is value in a zombie deck like this. I've also seen people kind of talk against Grim Return. I think it's silly because Grim Return, with all the removal you have in your deck, it's a very, very easy way of gaining perhaps a very, very powerful creature from your opponent's side at instant speed. And since you only have 1 of them, you're not going to be using it all the time, unfortunately. But it is something that is going to come as a surprise to your opponent a lot of the time. And also, if you drop that Grave Titan, and next turn, for example, your opponent, like you have Grim Return in your hand, your opponent has a kill spell or removal spell, destroys your Grave Titan, you cast Grim Return, it comes back into play, you get more zombies. There's many ways that Grim Return really can help you out, and change the board state quite a bit from what your opponent expected it to be. And the fact that you can kill your opponent's creature and regain it or gain it, put it back into play, is huge, because it makes it so that he loses a creature, you gain a creature, and that's a 2 creature difference in essence. And especially since you get to choose, for example, a really powerful creature of his. Liliana's Reaver is an awesome card. It is almost a little too good. It's a 4/3 for 4 with Death Touch, and when it deals combat damage to a player, not only does it force that player to discard a card, you also get to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, albeit tapped. But still, how nuts is that? Abattoir Ghoul, I've also seen people not running this. I like it. I like it a lot. Um, it is it is a little slower than running some of the earlier drops, but it just does so much for you. The fact that it has first strike almost makes it worth running. Where the hell is it? Oh, there we go. Almost makes it makes it worth running Vial of Poison, but not quite. But the fact that it has first strike, kind of, yeah. Well, I guess you could definitely run Vial of Poison because the fact that it has first strike makes it so that you can get rid of some big threats and gain life. Just because it first strikes, kills with death touch and so on and so forth. But not not the best. Not the best option. It's just good on its own, and if you get both of them in there, you can ward off 6 toughness creatures just by having them as blockers. So really good in that regard. Undead Warchief is so good, and the fact that they gave us 2 is almost unfair. 4 cost 1/1, which is, when it's in play, it's gonna be a 3/3/2. It's just how simple that is. It's buffing your entire zombie cast of zombies with +2/+1 rather than +1/+1, and it makes your zombie spells cheaper. So that is really insane. Definitely is a card where you would run as many as they would give you. Just because having this guy down makes your side very impressive, really fast. I run one of Endless Ranks of the Death, or of the Dead. It is a little slow, but I've also heard talk against it. I would say that it's a little bit silly because Endless Ranks of the Dead is very powerful, and you only need a few turns, and I would say in my experience, in most games you get to play, you you definitely have more than 2 zombies, or 2 zombies at least in play when you play this guy or this card, and the next turn you have another zombie. So perhaps you lose a zombie, but you still have 2, and at some point your opponent is gonna run out of kill spells or ways of killing your zombies, and you stall out a little bit. Suddenly your side is looking incredibly impressive, and your opponent probably can't keep up with it. Grave Pact is really great because you're not afraid of losing your guys, especially when it forces, like, when you have like stuff like Death Baron. If you have that guy in play, then you kill one of their guys when they kill one of your guys, and you force them to also sacrifice another guy. So it makes them think more carefully about how they're blocking, or attacking for that matter. And it even makes it so that if you want to get rid of a threat with the hexproof or something, you can just Tendrils of Corruption your one of your guys, and if they only have that hexproof guy or indestructible or something, then yeah, you just force them. You pretty much force them to sack a creature. There's so many ways of comboing with this card that that feels a little bit unfair if you're if you're your own opponent. Tendrils of Corruption is just a great card. It's kind of like it's kind of like what's it called? Corrupt, just for creatures, and it's one of those very powerful and good removal spells that you need in this deck. And the fact that it gains you a bunch of life makes the stalling game great, because there are some matchups where you will get smacked in the face really fast, really quickly, because a lot of your guys can't block on the first turn, maybe even on the second or third turn, like Gravecrawler and Diregraph Ghoul and so on. So the fact that you can regain life and stabilize while you're growing your board position is very powerful. That is Like it's kind of a remnant of the Obedient Dead deck from Magic 2013, where uh, part of the strategy was also, like taking your time building a mana pool while you killed off your opponent's creatures, you warded off their forces, and at some point you would have enough mana to just drop those bombs. And part of your strategy was to gain a lot of life while you took away your opponent's creatures and life as well. Consuming Vapors is great because it is value. It forces it does two things. It forces your opponent to sacrifice a creature rather than dealing with the whole targeting thing. So you can get rid of creatures of any color, creatures with Shroud, with hexproof, and so on and so forth. You gain life equal to that creature's toughness, and the next turn your opponent knows that this spell is coming back for free, so he's not going to cast a spell. So that gives you a little bit of tempo advantage. Um, because why would he cast a creature if he knew that he's just going to sacrifice it? So yeah. Cruel Revival is, in my opinion, it's a little expensive, and I'm not running all of them. I think I'm running 3 out of 4. The problem with it is its cost, definitely, but the fact that it brings guys back from the graveyard makes it so that you change you throw like a wrench in their plans, or in their wheel, in their machinery, and you kind of change, you 2-for-1 change a situation where your opponent might have a very powerful creature. You take that away from him, and you bring back a creature of your own, which he took away from you. So he loses a creature and you gain a creature. And that's kind of the reason why you want to run a bunch of these. But the fact that it's so expensive makes it so that I don't want to run all 4 of them. Grave Titan is awesome. There's not much that needs to be said about him. The fact that he has animated art with living zombies, um, just twisting and turning in his gut is pretty awesome. He's a 6/6 for 6 with Death Touch and brings guys every turn if he attacks. That's really, really cool. The fact that he's a giant makes him a little vulnerable to your opponent's removal, because not only is he going to be a major target for them, he's also difficult to bring back. So yeah, you want to be a little bit careful with him, much much more careful than you would like to be. Mikaeus the Unhallowed is also an awesome card. It doesn't do the exact same thing for you immediately, but it does a lot for you immediately. It buffs your entire side, zombies or not, and it gives all your creatures undying, all other creatures than Mikaeus, and it itself has Intimidate. So it's just very powerful, and it's helped me out a lot. Every time I have this guy down, of course he gets crosshairs directly on his forehead, but if you can manage to, if you have a sizable army and your opponent has a somewhat sizable army, or you're kind of in a stalemate in a sense, then Mikaeus really changes that around, because um, it makes your side bigger. You get to swing in. Um, if he kills some of your creatures, they're going to come back with Undying, and that's gonna make them bigger. Plus, it's gonna untap them and ready up for his swing. So Mikaeus is definitely a very, very cool card, and a very decent late game strategy to drop at the right moment. Nightmare is an awesome card. It's not necessarily, you have the option of running 2 of them. It's not necessarily the best card to be running 2 of in this deck, but I think one is somewhat required, because you want something in case that your opponent is dropping huge angels, or just flying creatures that you find it difficult to get around. Um, Aside from that, the fact that this deck is mono black just makes it so that Nightmare is going to be huge. But aside from that, it's not really going to do a lot for you other than just smack in or bash in. And it's a great card, definitely. But it is. I think the only reason that I keep it in is because it has flying. Aside from that, I would prefer more zombies, to be honest. Corrupt, I think you can run two of them. I only run one because I don't think I need more than one. If I need more than one, then I'm definitely losing the match to things where I need to use my corrupt on creatures rather than use my corrupt on my opponent, and I'd rather use my corrupt on my opponent and if need be, perhaps remove one big creature or something like that. It's definitely a good card, but I almost think that Tendrils of Corruption is better in this deck because you're relying way more on being able to smack in with creatures, whereas in the Liliana deck you relied much more on the ability to just drain your opponent's life. So I don't think like it's a weird word to use, but I don't think it synergizes as much with this deck as it did with Obedient Dead. All right, let's take a look at the cards that I'm running in my or that I'm not running rather. Vial of Poison. It's well, it's decent, but you're definitely telegraphing your. You're not only telegraphing, you're showing your opponent what you're doing with this, and it's a one shot. Once it's done, it's out, and there's not much you can do about it. So yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily that good. I'd rather have another zombie, to be honest. Quest for the Gravelord is a creature that, or an enchantment that I'm considering putting back into the deck. Um, but and the fact that it gives you a 5/5 black zombie giant is pretty insane. You very easily get to pop it, but I think I would rather have quick zombies in the beginning of the match and be able to use those for synergetic effects or synergistic effects with some like sacrifice mechanics and reanimation or like bring back effects than this card, which doesn't really do anything from the graveyard. It brings you a guy, and if it's removed, you don't really have too many options after that. Vampiric Tutor is, I guess it's good, kind of, and then it's not because it doesn't bring the card that you need into your hand. It only brings it to the top of your library, so it's not fast enough in that sense. And yeah, yeah, I don't like it too much. I didn't have too many good experiences with it, and if you build your deck correctly, then well, not most of the time, but a lot of the time, you're just gonna get the cards that you need anyway. So I think it's not a dead card by any means, but it's close to it, and it's kind of close to the concept of it being a dead card because hopefully most of the cards that you draw are going to be good and are going to be valuable for you every turn that you play them. So yeah, I don't know. It definitely could help you out, but I'd rather use other tactics. Bloodgast, I was really struggling with this card because I really like it, but the fact that it's not a zombie was like the deal breaker. It's so good, and every part of it, except for the fact that it's not a zombie, really, really, really works well with the theme of this deck. It's difficult to get rid of. It just keeps coming back and just keeps swinging in, and it's just a nuisance. But the fact that it's not a zombie makes it so that there's just not a slot in the deck for it. Black Cat, I could definitely see running this card if you want to be a little bit more controlly, but I don't. I just want to be a little bit more. I definitely want the deck to be a bit controlly, but I wanted to rely more on combos and being a little bit more aggro. And I think Black Cat is not doing a lot for you. Sure, it forces your opponent to discard a card at random, and that could be good at some point during the match. It could also end up, just it's for example, your opponent ends up discarding a land or a spell that that's not that useful for him, something that he draws an extra copy of next turn or something like that. Plus, when it's on the table, it's just a 1/1. So I mean, you would need to build a deck around this with ravenous rats and stuff like that. You would need to build a real discard deck for this to be good. Discard and self-sacrifice deck, and just don't think this deck is it. Walking Corpse, I could put a couple of these in just to have more early drops, but I just don't think it's very good. You need pump guys, cross pumping guys, or cross buffing guys in order to make this guy significant. Aside from that, he's just a chomp blocker or a slow beater. So, yeah. I guess I didn't use the word slow beater correctly. Anyways, took out a Doomblade, already talked about it. Exhume, I think, is a great card, but not in this deck. You already have better ways of bringing cards back from your graveyard. Shrivel doesn't do enough, and if it was an instant spell, then for sure. I love the fact when you like spells like these, when you cast them at instant speed during combat, and your opponent, who's just assigned blockers, realize that oops, he's going to lose his whole side or something's not right here. I love that feeling, but with sorcery spells, you just don't get that. You don't get that. Plus, you lose your guys first, and then you play Shrivel, and then your opponent's creatures die. It's just not good enough. It's not fast enough, and it doesn't do enough. So no thanks. Plus, it's also your creatures. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's good. Staff of the Death Magus is just like the other staffs. I don't want them. Soulbleed is an awful card. It doesn't do a lot. It's kind of like Pillory of the Sleepless, aside from the fact that it doesn't really tie your opponent's creatures down. If it said that player loses 2 life, then I would consider running it. Well, maybe not even then, because this is not what the build that I'm running is about, but that would definitely make it more along the lines of what I would expect this card to do. The fact that you're going to play it on one creature, and he's just going to swing in now with that creature until you get tired of him swinging in and you kill it, or he kills it himself, and then you kind of wasted a card slot, and you kind of wasted mana for it, and so on and so forth. It just doesn't do a lot. Death Cloud is too tricky, too complicated. It does some incredible things, but I don't think I am the type of, well, I'd like to be able to run it to my advantage, but you would have to have so many things going for you to begin with in order for it to certifiably be to your advantage when you play this card, because it fucks your side up as well. You lose X life, you discard X cards, you sacrifice X creatures, and then you sacrifice X lands. So it's not just your opponent. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe if you're running endless ranks of the dead and your opponent just have those great creatures on his side that ties your side down, and you're stalling and stalling in order to grow your army big enough. So eventually you play Death Cloud, and those creatures, your opponent is forced to discard or sacrifice those creatures, and you can finally get in with your massive zombie army. Maybe in that kind of situation, but I don't know. I think it's too slow, and it relies on too many X factors. So yeah, already talked about endless ranks of the dead, and one is significant. One is sufficient. That's the word I'm looking for. Mutilate. Such a good card, except for the fact that it also destroys your side, and in my experience, the situation that you find yourself in, where you want to wipe the board, or where you want to kill your opponent's creatures en masse, is not gonna be a situation where you don't have any creatures. It's going to be a situation where you do have creatures, but they're not able to block, or like you want to tip the scales. You don't want to wipe the board. Of course, there is the whole thing about your creatures being easy or being somewhat easy to bring back from the graveyard, as opposed to many other in many other decks. But I think the only situation where you really want this is against, for example, Slipper Hive or Avacyn's Glory or something like that, and those decks are already stacked with creatures, so that next turn your opponent is probably gonna drop one or two creatures and regain that creature advantage and outguy you basically. So I don't think it does enough in this deck, and it basically stalls because it also kills your guys, and your guys are not going to be huge, so it doesn't necessarily help you too much against Hunter's Strength or something like that. For that, you need targeting removal spells or targeted removal spells that takes care of creatures regardless of their size without killing your creatures. So yeah, I don't like Mutilate in this deck, but I love it in many other kinds of decks. Veilborn Ghoul is not as bad as people say, but it's certainly not good. The fact that it can't block is really annoying. I don't know. The fact that you have to recast it for 5, the fact that it costs 5, make it pretty bad. It's nice that it's able to return from the graveyard pretty much every turn you cast or just every turn you cast a swamp, but you still have to cast it, and it's a 5 cost. So the only situation where it's decent is when your opponent is low on life. He doesn't really have any creatures to block with. You don't have a lot of creatures to attack with, but you do have a Veilborn Ghoul, and you keep getting you get mana flooded, and you keep bringing this guy back. I could definitely see this guy working to your advantage, but that's a lot of conditions. So yeah, it's not that good. Firebog Boneflinger is actually not that bad. It's only a 2/2 for 5, but it kills off a creature, or at least it diminishes or makes a creature -2/-2 smaller. So it's yeah, it's nice, but it's a little expensive and a little late game and a little bit slow for this deck, in my opinion. Cruel Revival, running 3 of them, like I said, not the fourth one. Nightmare, already talked about it. Zombie Apocalypse is nice in certain matchups, and probably only Avacyn's Glory. However, it is really, really good against Avacyn's Glory. In all of the matchups, it's probably not going to be bringing a lot of zombie creatures back, because you have other ways of bringing them back. So it kind of feels like you're kind of feels in most cases that you are wasting this card and a lot of mana playing this card instead of playing another creature, for example. Corrupt, already talked about it. Grave Betrayal is a great card, but it's way too expensive. So yeah, it's definitely decent once you have it in play, but as soon as well, up until then, and up until you take control of that first creature that your opponent used to own, it just feels like a waste of mana, and it's just too slow. Rise of the Dark Realms, yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's a pretty awesome effect, but would you really want to be stuck with this card during the early game or mid game, or even who knows if you ever make it to land drop 9? This deck should be working a little bit faster. So this is my build and the cards that I chose not to run in it. You can see that I'm only running 23 lands, which means that I have 3 more of the cards that I unlocked in the deck here. So yeah, that's how I run it. It's fairly beat oriented. It's fairly removal oriented. It's very heavy on the cross buffing. You have 2 Lords of the Undead. You have a Death Baron. You have we have him. We have 2 Undead War Chiefs, and you have a Mikaeus the Unhallowed. So in total, 6 creatures that buffs other creatures that you control, or itself even. In the case of Undead War Chief. So Definitely definitely very creature and removal oriented. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with some random matches online. Later!